Hello, my name's Colette, and this is our second in the series of air quality. And today, in the Coffee with Colette series for episode 12. And today, I have the pleasure of having Don Everingham here with me.
Hello, Colette. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent, enjoying the weather. So today, we're going to be talking about all things air quality here in Comal County, and we will dive into the science and the engineering behind it, and from policy to air quality monitors to how you determine air quality, and all questions related to that. So thankful to have you here and really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you.
So just a little background. May I call you Don?
Yes.
Okay. He has a BS degree in agricultural engineering and agronomy. It was a double major from the University of Idaho. And he's worked on several research projects for soil erosion studies and its effect on rain on clay soils, in northern Idaho and eastern Washington. And he has a 30 plus years experience in land reclamation, in big machinery mining, in design and custom heavy equipment design, and you can help me out here because there's
fabrication.
That's an area I don't know a lot about, I'll be honest. And but his experience in water and soil conservation methods and mining reclamation for land. And for the past 20 years or so, he had prime interest in the study of the southwestern United States in water issues surrounding land development and farming, soil conservation, mining, and the impact those have on river basins, aquifers, and land subsided caused by overpumping and the allocation of surface water resources. So welcome today. I really appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you. Well, even though my hobby's been for the last 20 years, water and aquifers and things like that, we'll talk about air today. We'll just stick with the air quality.
All right. Okay. So did I leave anything out, or would you like to correct anything that I had just said?
No, actually, I am a graduate of the University of Idaho. I grew up in Idaho on a potato farm and ranch, and moved to Texas 27 years ago to get out of winter. Don't like snow anymore. And I've been all over the world. I've worked in mining operations in Australia, Indochina, in the Southwest and Western states. And that's really where I kind of got interested in water, as water is going to be our big problem in the future. But as I said, we'll stick with air today. Having a science and engineering background, I've always been kind of interested in how to fix things, make things better than they are, make sure that they were done correctly, that kind of thing. And science is something that is exacting and requires precise measurement and a deep understanding sometimes, and making sure that you have your numbers all lined up correctly so that the results come out right. And that's kind of what drives me. I get up every day. I try to learn something new every day, and I usually do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my background and where I come from, and that's why I like science and engineering. And got started, I guess, as a young man, filling in my first gravel pit or reclaiming my first gravel pit when I was 15 years old. It was on a family farm in Idaho, and I learned a lot. There was nobody there to really teach me other than about the safety of the heavy equipment.
Trial and error.
Pardon?
Trial and error.
Yeah, so anyway, I learned a lot on my own. I ate a lot of dust and learned that, you know, you need to have masks on. So that fits right in today. But I've enjoyed the career in engineering and traveling around the world and making new friends and improving mining and reclamation operations and custom designed equipment for better mining. And I guess that's what drew me into this air quality thing in Texas. We have some serious problems and some serious deficiencies here. So that's, I guess, what we're going to talk about today, correct?
It is. So
Okay.
so Comal County, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it has 11 open pit quarries, 9 asphalt plants, 7 concrete batch plants, and 2 cement plants. And I don't know if some of those probably fall in Bear and here, like across the county line. I'm not sure. Could you talk about what's happening here in Comal County with the aggregate mining industry?
Yes, actually, in Comal, as well as the entire escarpment, the Balcones escarpment, which basically runs from Uvalde all the way up into North Texas, is a very rich limestone. It's a very high quality limestone, and that is what the quarries are after. They of course, grind it up to various sizes for various applications, whether it's road ballast or railroad ballast or gravel for a highway or backfilling around a home or making cement, product, asphalt. They all take different grades of rock, but the quality of the rock is very good, and that's why they're here. So Comal County, like some other counties, are experiencing extremely rapid growth. We have quarry operations. Many of them are multinational corporations. They're owned by companies outside the United States. And to me, that is a problem from the standpoint of maybe their attitude is to come to Texas, tear up Texas, dig it up, sell the product, take the profits, and go home and leave the taxpayers of Comal County and other taxpayers in other counties with the bill to clean it up and do the reclamation. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a lot to deal with the air quality again around the process. And that, I think, is what we want to talk a little bit more about today.
Correct. So, could you talk about, so one of the aspects of, it's not just so there's quarry blasting, we have crushing, we have hauling processes, there are the high level of the carcinogenic particulate matter, there's the size of the particulate matter, 2.5 and 10, I think is one of the things we're going to talk about here. And then you have visible dust, which is the larger particles that are also created by the movement of the front end loaders, the mining trucks, the transfer conveyors, and excavators, bulldozers, utility vehicles, etc. And so while the rock quarries create this invisible dust particles, they prove to cause silicosis. Is that right? And so I'd like you to talk about, one, just give us a rendition on like particulate matter but also like the chemical composition of, and then.
Well, you're right on
talking and we can kind of weave in and out.
Yeah, you're right on all of those points. It might help if we just start with basically where Texas is on regulations and what they control. And unlike many other states, matter of fact, most of the states in the United States, Texas is one of 7 states that have the least amount of control, regulatory requirements, bonding, surety bonds, things like that. So in Texas, the only thing that has to be regulated for a mining application is the crushing, and the crushing and the handling of the material at the elevators, for example, the screening plants, and that can be controlled somewhat by water. They do not require that crushers or elevators be enclosed like some states do or some mining operators do automatically. And the trucks and the railroad loading in the quarry itself is somewhat regulated from the particulate matter, which is what you're talking about, PM 2.5 and PM 10. Mm-hmm. And that's it. What they don't regulate is the in-road or in-quarry, in-mine roads that the haul trucks use, or the loading area where the loaders are loading the face material into these trucks. Those are unregulated. Stockpiles where the material either from the crusher or the screening plants are stored or unregulated, and those are highly exposed to the wind. There is no reclamation required. So if you look at these pits like the one near New Braunfels in Comal County, that mine started under a different company's name back in the 30s. And you look at it today and there isn't any sign of any reclamation at all. And the mine owners
in 90 years.
Pardon?
In 90 years.
Yes, and the operators or the owners of these mines will tell you that, well, the reclamation is not a problem. There's always a Six Flag, there's a Rim shopping center, or there's somebody like that going to come in and make something out of the quarry when they're done. But if you look at the economy today and things that are happening in the economy, such as Amazon and Walmart with their home deliveries and things like that, I don't think anybody's going to be building a lot of brick and mortar buildings and shopping centers in the future. I think things are going to change.
So I want to interrupt you real quick. So just for the audience that may be watching, my understanding of land reclamation is the process to heal the land that's been damaged after mining or extraction, or say in oil and gas, that's written in oftentimes into the leases, depending on who you're signing leases with and how savvy they are. Mm-hmm. So could you explain to the audience what land reclamation is and what it looks like?
Yes, land reclamation done correctly is if you start a mine today and open up, let's say, 4 or 5 acres to get started, as you move the face, that's where they're doing the blasting, and we'll talk about the blasting here in a minute. As it moves from the starting point to wherever the mine will end in, 50, 100 years, whatever land assets they have, you should be reclaiming an acre for every acre that you're opening up. That's generally the way that coal mining, strip mining is done in Wyoming and some of the other Western mining operations of phosphate and other metals that are mined. In the Balcones escarpment, if you look at the mines, there is no reclamation. And in my opinion, it's strictly my opinion, they've been lucky that somebody's come along and put a shopping center in one, or an entertainment park in one, or a swimming slide type amusement park in one, or something like that. But that isn't a mine plan. A reclamation plan is something that should be done prior to the mine even being opened up. It should include a site review that seeks out all of the sensitive features, particularly in our karst geology here, of caves and sinkholes and things like that. Wildlife should certainly be taken into consideration. And one thing that really should be looked at is our water availability in our residential areas. And those areas are totally being ignored. And these mines are going in based on the fact, again, that all they have to do is qualify for an air permit using data for a crusher and the stormwater discharge.
So, I mean, you know, if this is done right, and there's a lot of states that where it is done in a way, you can, the areas that have already been mined, you can restore them. I mean, I know it doesn't happen overnight, and you have to work with obviously the land that has been taken away because mining in and of itself removes the land. So it doesn't look like a giant moonscape, basically. You can bring some semblance of healing and natural habitat back to that area if done properly.
That's correct. And again, to go back to what I was saying about you open up an acre, you close an acre with reclamation. What that really means is that you're taking the overburden to start with, which is the topsoil and maybe some of the undesirable material that lays right on top of the high quality limestone, and you stockpile that off to the side. And as the mine moves inland, this topsoil and any additional materials that are accumulated are positioned in such a way that the mine really doesn't have to move them more than once, and they can doze or they can push the material right back over the land. And contouring is something that needs to be done, particularly in this area where we get these high intensive rainfall periods at time. You have to be able to control the erosion until the vegetation takes hold. And vegetation here can be scrub brush, grass,
Native
cactus.
grasses. Yeah.
I mean, even good old juniper trees work, but they should restore it back to what it originally was. And by doing that, they eliminate the dust aspect of what they're going to generate in the quarry that is not being measured or not being used to develop the air permit that allows them to operate in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for explaining that. We could do a whole episode just on that.
It is.
So let's get into the air quality aspect. And you know, Dr. Randolph and I talked some about the health aspects, but we really only scratched the surface, no pun intended, on, you know, how particulate matter affects heart disease, stroke, infertility, pregnancy complications. And specifically, one of the things we didn't really talk about much was the effect on asthma in children. However, not to get ahead of myself, so let's dive in a little deeper to particulate matter, and maybe people did not see the first episode, and kind of what is 2.5 and 10 particulate matter, and why does it matter when testing air quality?
Okay. Actually, there are 6 elements, pollutants that are classified at that EPA requires to be monitored, and 4 of those fall into the ozone category, and we can talk about that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. The ones that are not primarily getting the attention that they need is the particles of the 2.5 in the PM10, and those are really based on the size in micrograms or microns, micrometers, is the size diameter of the particulate. Matter of fact, let me pull up a slide and just show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, you can see that?
I can, thank you.
Okay, this is the PM 2.5 right here in the red, in the pink, and it's the smallest of the two that we're looking at primarily right now, and the PM10 is down here. And if you look at this shaft here, that's a human hair, and that's usually about 50 to 70 microns. Some scales will run that all the way up to 100 microns, but the blue indicates the PM10, and you can see how many little PM units there are across this hair. And the PM 2.5, you can again see the scale here of, looks like 4 or 5 laid across the PM10. And again, that's the diameter of the particle.
So is the PM10 and the 2.5, both of them you can't see with the naked eye, or?
No, the PM10 is actually visible, and
okay.
PM 2.5 is under the right conditions visible under a microscope, or if somebody's really got super excellent vision and the laboratory conditions are correct, you might be able to see a PM 2.5. Generally, anything at 2.5 and less is invisible to the naked eye, and basically the only way you can see it is under an electron microscope. Even good laboratory microscopes are not adequate to really look at or to study PM 2.5. And that's what makes it so dangerous. It's a respirable particle. And if it happens to be a particle of, let's say, crystalline silica or some other pollutant like that, those get into the pollutants that are now going to be endangering a person's health, particularly if they have any kind of underlying health issues.
Okay.
One thing why we're on this chart that I want to introduce today that a lot of people don't see is the nanoparticle, and that is the thing that is beginning to come to the forefront of research in this particle argument, you might say, about air quality. And if you look at this chart down here in the corner, the blue again is a micron, 10 micron size unit, and the little yellow ball here is the 2.5. But if you look right here on the yellow ball, you see it looks like a little blue line on the slide. Mm-hmm. That's actually a series of little round balls too that are called ultrafine particles. And sometimes ultrafine is applied to PM 2.5, but generally is even smaller, all the way down to 1 micron in size, or even particles as small as 0.5 or 0.05. I mean, this gets into real nasty particles that are inhalable. And frankly, the human body is not designed to deal with those kind of particles. And what we see today with this rapid growth on the escarpment and uncontrolled industry, we have all of this dust that's in the air and not properly monitored or measured.
So what about it is, so what about the aggregate mining industry that produces 2.5?
Okay.
Or is it because it's just not naturally occurring?
Well, the particles come from basically what is referred to in the industry as fugitive dust. And the fugitive dust covers a pretty broad spectrum. And as you're beginning to see here, the air quality question and air issue becomes very complex very quickly. There's lots of things involved here. So the PM 2.5, PM10, and even the nanoparticles can be produced in the quarry by blasting. It can be produced at the crusher during the crusher operation. It can be produced in the screening plants. It can be produced on the haul roads where the trucks are running back and forth, grinding this material all the time. And it can be produced on the trucks and by automobiles or pickups when it gets out on the public roads. So we have a continuous growth in the background concentration, which is a measurement of these particles in the air inventory, which is the database that the monitors are collecting the data for. And that data eventually then is used in a mathematical formula called modeling, that again is used to grant the quarry the air permit that allows them to operate and create this mesh to start with. So,
what, I guess I just want to pinpoint a little more to get into, and then we'll dive into the monitoring. But so what is it about the chemical composition of our air emissions, like the percentage of silica in the 2.5 particulate matter, that is so harmful? I mean,
okay, well, first of all, let me say that particle matter can come from a lot of places. I mean, even the exhaust pipe of a diesel truck is putting PM material out, because when you burn diesel fuel, you're creating a particle that is exhausted out. And today, the diesels, for example, have particulate traps on them, on the trucks, and they actually have to clean these or burn them off. Some of them actually have very high temperature burn off equipment. But the particles that are coming out of the quarries are a rock material. So you have to go back into the geology. And this is where it gets really interesting, because now you're bringing in other science and disciplines to look at these things. Different materials can generate higher or lower quantities of particulate matter depending on how hard it is or how soft it is, whether it's a metal ore or whether it's just a gravel or something like that. And this fugitive dust that is created then is what needs to be controlled and is not being controlled or adequately measured. And as you said, we can get into that more when we get to the monitoring.
well, we can dive into the monitoring because I know that. So we have, I think, just one air quality monitor in Comal County, and I think that was put into effect mainly because of you and the technical team for Preserve Our Hill Country Environment and Stop Vulcan Quarry. And thank you for that. But up until then, we haven't had any. Is that correct?
Well, actually, if you go back in history, there has been some particulate monitors. They were PM10s back in the 90s that were set properly, I might add, upwind, downwind directional settings to monitor PM10. And I really don't know why those were set up in the early 90s, and I don't know why they were discontinued. But what I can tell you about the monitoring, not only in Comal County, which now has one active PM10 and 2.5 monitor. It's done in the same unit, but it's not positioned correctly. And we can talk about that in a minute. There are other monitors in Comal County. There's one in Bulverde, there's another one in Garden Ridge, and there's another one, I believe, at Fair Oaks, that are actually ozone monitors, but those only operate for meteorological data and on ozone alert days, is my understanding. The monitor that's currently in Comal County, which was put in September of 2019, I think was when it was installed, is not showing a lot of data. Matter of fact, it isn't showing any data right at the moment because it needs to run a while to generate a database that you can actually look at and start to make some determinations. And that's set at the water tank on Loop 337 in New Braunfels, kind of behind the HEB store there.
Mhm.
And it's not in an upwind, downwind position, which means that, for example, the closest quarry there being Cemex is not contributing much to it. Actually, the monitor itself is probably picking up more road information off of loop 337 there. And the
So was
street,
it TCQ who put that monitor in, or was it Comal County?
no, that is a TCEQ monitor. I am not aware that the county of Comal has any monitors. The counties do have a right to put together a monitoring program,
Right.
but I don't know of many counties that have done it because of the cost. These monitoring systems need to, in my opinion, be in what they call real time.
Mhm.
That's continuous monitoring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no exceptions. That is real time monitoring, and that's where you get true mathematical data based on the material that you're collecting. Now, that can be used, I think, correctly in models. Now, let me switch gears here a little bit because you asked another question there about this crystalline silica or another pollutant. Some monitors called gravimetric monitors can do both. They can measure the PM 2.5 and 10, or they can measure one at a time. It depends on how the monitor is set up and how sophisticated the monitor is. You can also have a feature in the monitor that has a filter, and that filter then is a collection system for catching the material itself, whatever it's measuring. And it doesn't matter whether it's PM10 or PM2.5. And if you're looking at silica, for example, you would take this slide then or screen, and you have to be very, very careful about it. It's a very sensitive protocol to remove this filter, put it in the right containment, and ship it to a laboratory where they chemically analyze it. And you can have that analyzed for crystalline silica. You can have it analyzed for chromium 6, which is in cement product, which if you have batch plants and things like that around, you might be interested in. You can look for calcium that may be in the rock formation. And that's where you're going to find the crystalline silica, is in that rock formation. And silica is the second most plentiful element on the planet behind oxygen.
Mhm.
So everything in our world, as we probably know it, has some form of silica in it, and that can come in several forms. But crystalline silica is the one that is very harmful to human health. And that's
Right.
because it's in the crystalline form. And when you break that crystal up into 2.5 particulate or even in the nanoparticles, it has jagged edges on it. If you were to look at this under a microscope or the electron microscope, you would see that it just a very jagged piece of material. It embeds itself in that soft tissue, and that then is the beginning of silicosis or other problems that will lead to heart attacks, heart ailments. It even affects kidneys, things like that. But
You have like stroke, infertility, pregnancy complications, incurable lung disease, and it'd be interesting to see kind of how that looks on top of kind of a global pandemic of a virus that attacks the lungs. But I know uh, one of the things that really is of interest and concern for me is that the San Antonio, New Braunfels metro area has asthma rates of 1 in 7 children, which is twice the national average. And Comal ISD has over 2,000 students with asthma health alert on the file. And so when you're looking at this type of air quality in Comal County being not what it should be, this is a direct correlation and concern to the health and quality of life of people who live in Comal County.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, and crystalline silica and other chemicals that are out there, other minerals, elements, can lead to a number of health issues. And, you know, people like Dr. Randolph and other toxicologists and people like that are better suited to answer that question than I am. But basically, these materials either get embedded in your respiratory system, and I don't know exactly what the interaction is there, but it causes the inflammation, I guess you would call it, that leads to the disease of whether it's heart related or lung related, or some other organ. But
arthritis, I think, is another one.
yeah, I mean, it can affect a lot of things, and what really becomes dangerous is when you get back to the nanoparticles, which now are very tiny subunits of 2.5. These particles are the size or even smaller than viruses, and since we're in a pandemic right now, everybody's talking about virus. Well, these particles are actually in some cases smaller than the virus particle that we're dealing with the pandemic, and can actually enter the human skin and immediately go right into the bloodstream and circulate to organs or the heart. And they are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the PM 2.5. Now, what's bad about this in Comal County or any other county in Texas right at the moment is nobody knows what the levels are. We, in our tech team air samples that we took in 2018, 2019, we know that we found crystalline silica, which was the one thing we were looking for, at higher rates than are stated by any of the quarries in the state as being in their material. So somebody needs to straighten that record out. Now, we know from follow-up in 2019, and we don't have our tests finished because the pandemic's kind of held up the laboratories for other uses, but we have crystalline silica hits that are every bit as of what we found in 2018. We also have found this in rock samples that we've gone out in the field and harvested. We have found it in the product that's being made in the quarry operations, and we've found it on road dust where it's been carried out of these quarries and is on public roads. And the other thing that we're looking at with nanoparticles is those are out there in terms of even like rubber tires that wear out on automobiles and trucks. So we have nanoparticles of rubber that's floating in the air, and we don't even have an idea of what that is and how that would interface with some of the other particles that we have coming from the minerals or the elements. So we have, in my opinion, and you can visually tell this if you've been a resident of the area and particularly lived in the hill country for a long time, where you maybe had 20 years that you could look back. The rain period that we just came through, if you walk out on your deck today and you look through the trees, or if you can see through the trees, at the horizon, you will see very clear features. There is no dust in the air. The rains and the moisture has taken it out. There's not a lot of mining activity going on because they can't get the trucks into a lot of the construction sites and stuff like that. And you can see things that you can't see on days when we're having the warmer weather and maybe, yes, a little bit of ozone in the air. But the night and day effect of what you're seeing is clean air versus contaminated air. And what we know from measuring the air, and what is being documented by even the satellites now that can look at air quality as well. We're finding hot spots all over the country, and we're particularly finding the hot spots on the Balcones Escarpment in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So if the satellite can see it and we can visually see it and see the difference between like today or yesterday and let's say a period of 30 days when there isn't any moisture in the air to speak of from rain or cleansing it, why is the state saying that the air quality is improving? Why is the quality, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Why is the quality of air improving, and yet we're having more and more of this particular matter in the air? Something isn't adding up in the way they're collecting their samples or the database that's being collected. And in my opinion, that comes back to they're not doing real-time monitoring. They're doing 1 in 6 days for 24 hours, or they're not running the monitor at all except when they have an ozone alert day, or they're doing some other type of schedule. You need to run these monitors 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in the correct position, upwind, downwind, and you need to rely on good meteorological data to set those. Now, in addition to setting a monitor, it isn't just going to the field and picking a spot and saying, okay, this is an open area and it's upwind, downwind, I'm going to set it here. Right. You also need to have a grid system where you have monitors that maybe, just for the sake of example, every 100 feet for 3 in a row, every 100 feet to the right, every 100 feet to the left at right angles, and we need to measure elevational differences. We need a ground level intake at maybe 7 feet, it's kind of a common ground level intake. We need to do one maybe at 14 or 15 feet, and we need to have another one maybe at 20 or 25 feet. And this can be done by using a portable instrument to start with to take samples like what our tech team is doing to evaluate an area and determine, is this a good area to set a monitor to collect good information to make good engineering decisions with.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Sorry?
I'm going to interrupt you real quick to just kind of circle back a little bit. So we've been talking about air quality issues with the aggregate mining industry and the lack of data and the lack of data that could be sought after by installing air quality monitors within Comal County. So and I'm going to have a little tangent and then I'll bring it back. So Texas law actually allows counties and cities the authority to set up their own air quality monitors or run county inspection of facilities and to report any violations to TCEQ. So for a while now, the county commissioners in the county has chosen not to kind of hold TCEQ's feet to the fire or do their own, to put up air quality monitors to verify research, especially specifically with this Vulcan Quarry air permit. And so I know that Harris County has been running their own air quality monitors for several years now, but they're really focusing more on ozone instead of, like you had suggested, or is it particulate matter 2.5 and 10. So what we need here is to implement and put in air quality monitors in different areas in the county so we can get a better reading and judge on what the air quality is specifically, instead of, we know it's not great, but if we don't have the data to really say, hey, this is exactly what's going on, then you can't really do anything about it. So why is it that, in your opinion, what exactly would having the air quality, putting in the air monitors do?
Well, if they were following a good engineering scientific design for locating these monitors, they would put it in based on a grid system with good meteorological data. Okay. Now, again, that means the upwind, downwind thing, just to keep it simple. But what TCEQ does is they have no requirement to do this, because EPA right now has no requirements to make them do that. The EPA basically has accepted Texas program under what they call a SIP program, a state implemented plan monitoring, and it has to be reviewed every 5 years. But let me take this up to the federal level for you for just a minute so you can really see the picture of it here. Okay. Is the EPA, who is charged with and originally was set up by the Clean Act or Clean Air Act, starting back in 1955, and it was amended in 63 and I think 70, and then ultimately we ended up with what we have today. The EPA has relaxed the air standards based on the fact that this is such a complicated subject that the administrator of the EPA had a scientific committee set up of 47 members, and about 20 of them were PhD research experts in their field in all levels, toxicology, or can't talk here, toxicology, and some other science discipline, engineering, monitor experts, and their job was to review and help the EPA administrator look at the national ambient air standards for the protection of human health. Mm-hmm. This group had the job or the assignment of reviewing these standards every 5 years. They were recently fired, I think in 2008, 18, I think was the year, maybe 17. They were basically fired by EPA Administrator Wheeler. And there was a replacement group of 7 individuals put in place. 2 of them were from Texas, TCEQ, which makes you scratch your head a little bit. But the group that was fired were, again, professionals and experts in their field and academia. They were reviewing the National Ambient Air Standard for PM 2.5, which currently is 35 micrograms per cubic meter for a 24-hour test. Their recommendation, based on their study, was to reduce that to 12. They had looked at it and studied it at 21 micrograms per cubic meter. They were probably going to put a standard in place of somewhere around 10 or 12. And when you see things like that happening from scientific, professional individuals, you've got to ask yourself a question: why are they reducing the exposure limits that we all live under?
You have a slide on the exposure limits,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Let's just go back to this beginning here and look at it real quick. What most people are seeing most of the time is a chart like this one. You can see my cursor, right?
I can.
Okay, this is a bar graph that's color-coded, and most people look at it, and if they have a green day, it means the air quality is good and there's no problem. But if they're down here in the red ozone alert day or something like that, and they're at 151 or 200, this is a problem area. This is where health effects are getting people into trouble. But the question is what does these numbers mean? And they mean absolutely nothing other than they're just a scale. What you need to look at is a monitor or a chart like this one over here that shows the 0 to 50 in the green, and it still basically says the same thing about air quality. There's no health impact, things like that. But it also has another scale here, which now starts to get scientific and actually means something to medical people and science and engineering people. And it says 0 to 54 parts per billion. Some charts will show parts per million, but this is an actual laboratory measurement number that is done by analysis. And if this is where the range of that sample comes in, there's no health issues. But if you get down here in the red, where we were before, where it's health problems, you now see what the numbers have increased to on this scale is 86 to 105 parts per billion. That actually means something, but very few people ever see these charts. So let me skip to another one here. This is one now that brings in the PM 2.5 and PM 10. And again, we have our scale over here that really means nothing. But now we have something that's backed up by the EPA, National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And the micrograms per cubic meter in 0 to 30 is minimal and is under the standard. The standard is for a 24-hour period, 35 micrograms per cubic meter. And that's this bar line on the graph.
Okay.
Some of the field tests that we have run and been very scientific about it is the blue bars that you see here based on locations around the quarries. And we have hit, I think this is the highest one, 250 micrograms per cubic meter. So that would put it in the area down here of very poor. And if you had respiratory problems or other health problems, you'd be in danger of having some issues. Now, ours is not a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year test, but we find this on a regular basis. And what happens is the TCEQ monitor only runs one in 6 days, and that may be a PM10 or a PM 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not collecting the data on the other 5 days or 6 days if you look at the whole week. So what are they collecting, and what are those real numbers that should appear on these charts for people to know whether they're at risk of being impacted by crystalline silica, for example, or some of the other just ozone compounds that may be out there.
Right, and you had, so on the, specifically on the proposed quarry, the Vulcan quarry, in, Comal County, that's over the aquifer recharge zone. So there, when TCEQ, when they applied for their permit, and TCEQ, the permitting agency, to go into how they acquired their air permit, the monitors that they used for Vulcan, I think they were in Selma, which is 12 miles away, and then Heritage Middle School, which was 26 miles away. And I think that you had said they were both in the upwind direction of prevailing wind. So they used monitors, but even the TCEQ and the EPA says that they need to be within 10 kilometers of the site.
Well, yeah, I think what you're getting at is TCEQ has a requirement for modeling and filing for an air permit or using the air permit formula, which is basically called air mod, and there's some other additional programs that go with that. But for example, you use Vulcan. That quarry up there, they allowed data from the Martin Marietta quarry over on Lower Smith and Valley Road. Now that original data that was done to permit Martin Marietta's
sorry, I need to plug my computer in real quick.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, I had to grab it off the floor.
That quarry's data was collected from monitors in San Antonio and out of the area. And when I say out of the area, TCEQ has allowed these companies that file for permits to use air data from places like Midlothian, which is up east of Waco, from Northwest Fort Worth, which is a international airport, they call it up there, but it's a small airport located on the northwest side of Fort Worth. And the problem with that is, if you look at the topography of the Vulcan quarry, it's got a lot of hills in it, it's got channels, and the way that land is structured, it has channels that are deep enough to change the wind direction, which means that when you're setting up the monitor to collect good data, good factual data, you have to take all of this into consideration as well as the meteorological data. They're not doing that. They don't even require it. And if you compare the property or the topography again at Vulcan's property with Midlothian, Midlothian is a flat prairie. And the wind data that they're collecting in the Midlothian area is not in the main wind stream either. And they do not have upwind, downwind monitors. And matter of fact, over the years, over the last, I think 15 years, there's something like 15 or 16 monitors up there that have been discontinued. They're not using them anymore, and those have been PM10 monitors primarily. That tends to be what TCEQ uses. And coming back down to Comal County, the Selma monitor not only was out of the mainstream wind flow, but it was too far away, and half of the year it wasn't going to collect anything except the particulate matter that came off of the I-35 freeway. That's it. That's all they were getting. And so to compensate for that, they had the company that did the air permit use data from a monitor down in the Calaveras Lake area. And there are several monitors down there that are owned, I don't know if they're owned by or just operated by CPS Energy. And those are there primarily for the CPS people to monitor their own activity in and around the power plants. And so they're using data collected at a power plant to permit a rock quarry in north central Bexar County or Comal County. And this is happening all over the state. And this is why TCEQ's got the name rubber stamp TCEQ. Their data is not factual and it's not complete because they're not looking at all of the factors necessary to do the correct type of monitoring based on hours of operation and location.
And in the Vulcan specifically, I know it's one of the biggest, right?
Well, Vulcan is a large material company. I don't know if they're the largest. I believe they're one of the largest, but they're an out-of-state corporation.
Is it Alabama? Is it right?
Yeah, I believe they're headquartered out of Birmingham, Alabama.
So I know that in Texas, there's been 80 formal complaints filed against Vulcan in Texas alone, and then 35 of those violations were at the materials plant on 1604 in San Antonio, which is not that far away, and over the years has gotten a lot of press, but not nearly enough. And I guess my question is what is the benefit, or why did Comal County kind of take the necessary steps to protect its citizens to really put in because the county has the right, and the law backs the county to set up air quality monitors. And why, I mean, I don't understand why didn't they? I mean,
Well, this is my opinion. I believe that the county, like a lot of counties and people that have been influenced by the Texas Aggregate Cement Association and maybe others, have taken this pro-growth approach. And again, I think that ignores, besides air, the real water question. But to stick with the air, they are not considering the impact that these industrial operations are having on the population. And they're not being truthful with the public about it. Now, at a public county commissioners meeting, I offered the services of our tech team, which are made up of 10 professionals. We have mining engineers, hydrologists, people that are experts in reclamation, hydrology, and karst geology, as well as the medical field. We have academia involved, and we offered to share with the county the impacts or the data that we had and what the concerns were. Never got any response at all. We were told that they would help us with the legislature and get us before the governor. Never happened. So,
well, so I'm curious to see why. I mean, if they say that, oh, it's about economic growth, well, I mean, you can't really say that, because it's not like the Vulcan Quarry employs more than about 15 people anyway, and that it's looking to decrease property value by 20%. It doesn't generate much tax revenue money. I know that it was requested for TCEQ to do an economic impact study, which they did not do, and it's impacting property rights, as well as, people aren't being compensated for losses, as well as all the aspects of when you bring in traffic and the amount of money it's going to cost the county for just to repair the roads alone. To me, the economics aren't there. So if it's not economically beneficial, and yet it's also damaging health, I'm really missing why. And the amount of it in water is a whole nother, we did a video on that, and that's a whole nother aspect of the effects it could have on our future drinking water and the recharge zone. I mean, I just don't see any benefit whatsoever in specifically this particular open pit quarry, but also in not doing what the county commissioners and the judge are supposed to be doing, which is to protect its citizens.
Well, that's true. It's my opinion again, but I think it's the opinion that's shared with probably a great deal of the population. It doesn't matter what government office you're running for or elected position. If you're running for an office, whether it's an association or a federal government or county or state or whatever, if you've got to have the heart to do the right thing for the people that you are taking a fiduciary responsibility to do the right thing for. And in this case, the issue we're talking about is public health. They need to stand up for the rights of people and not allow this activity in or around residential areas, schools, hospitals, or any place that could be an impact on humans. There's plenty of area in Texas to mine, And the operational cost between mining a few miles up the road is not that much different than mining right here in somebody's backyard. And there are literally homes that back up to some of these quarries that you could take a ping pong ball and throw over the fence and be in the area where they're blasting.
And there's, I think
They're
it's
that
about
close.
12,000.
Pardon?
I think there's about 12,000 people that live directly in vicinity of that Vulcan quarry that it affects in Comal County.
Yeah, there's
Specifically
a
that
couple.
one.
There's a couple of studies that were done, and we've looked at a couple of them very closely. And actually, if you look at the number of residential properties out there, and keep in mind, some of these properties are large in size for a reason. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. When I moved here and built my home 27 years ago, one of the things I did was go into the county office and talk to them about ag exemptions and property size and taxes and all kinds of things. Had a lot of questions. One of the things I ask is, why is there a requirement that says you can't build on less than 5 acres in the particular area where I built?
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me an answer: water. And so they knew the concern back then was water. So why are you allowing a quarry to come in that uses a tremendous amount of water to drill a well into the same aquifer that all of the large homeowner properties have? And why are you allowing developers to come in and build high density housing? Well, at that time, I guess they had water rights that they could use from Canyon Lake and other sources and things like that. Those are now used up and gone. So where are you going to get your water from for future development? And it's a question where you have to look at it holistically. It isn't just the quarries, because we need building materials. If you're going to build a rock home or pour a concrete driveway, you've got to have materials. But we don't need it in the backyard to be delivered, 2 or 3 miles down the road. Mm-hmm. It could easily be placed, as in some states, miles away and trucked in, or even brought in by rail to a receiving yard and then distributed from there. A number of states have county commissioners that do rule and make the decision on where quarries are going to be placed and how long they're going to be there. And they do require not only pre-mining plans, but closure plans, along with bonding, to make sure that the reclamation is done and done properly. So in Texas, we're just sort of out of control right at the moment.
Right. But the one thing, and I'm going to kind of wrap this up a little bit, because we're running a little long. But that's okay. There's a lot to talk about. There are things, even though the state has undercut in 2015, has really kind of undercut county control, and we've seen that in the sense of how counties and cities have struggled with implementing coronavirus or COVID-19 plans. If they differed from the state. I mean, we saw how that's just one way that it was. You could see how there was a kind of a kneecapping, so to speak, of the county control. But with the aspect of air quality monitors, the county can. And so I'm going to read this off a little bit and tell me what you think, because this is proposed by your tech team and your group of professionals that put this together as a request, that Comal County needs at least 6 official air quality monitors as soon as possible to monitor, to measure PM 2.5 dust and PM 10. They should be in central and southern Comal County. the area between Bulverde, Canyon Lake, New Braunfels, and Garden Ridge, and then you have 6 locations that y'all put together: Davenport High School, Smith and Valley High School, Rimrock Ranch Community Center, Vintage Oak Community Center, Danville Middle School, and Oak Run Middle School. And could you just say a little bit about why you chose those locations, and if there's anything else that you'd like to say while we come to a close?
Okay, well, yeah, we put those together some time back, and there's actually some additional locations we've considered, but
Okay.
the reason we chose those locations was, number one, children are basically more susceptible to health risk and damage from particulate matter and or any elements or mineral that might be in there that might be harmful, such as, the common ones that are known are lead, mercury, crystalline silica could be there, chromium 6, those kinds of things are a consideration of why the schools need to be aware of what's out there, protect those children. Number two is the monitors are quite expensive. They do require maintenance from time to time, and they require security. So they need to be someplace that's fairly secure, and most schools' yards are fenced or have fenced areas. And the monitors also need a power source. And schools and some of the government facilities out, like maybe the engineering office on 46, where there's electrical power, then the security, those are good places to look at to place monitors. But again, the key is look at where the source, the fugitive dust, is coming from or being generated, the source point, and make sure that it aligns with the wind direction, upwind, downwind, and then you place the monitor based on this grid system so that you get a true picture of the concentration levels that are out there.
And that's one of the things that we talked about, and then I also talked about with Dr. Randolph and then Mr. Olivier, is, one is just to know what you're dealing with, and having access to data on the county level really will lead into, it will be interesting to see if years down the line, if these are implemented, then you can start to overlay, data from health aspects of asthma rates.
You bring up an interesting question, because we've also looked at and had many visits with NASA, and there is satellite technology today that can verify ground readings and ground instrumentation. And we have compared some of our data with some of the satellite data that we have, and we know that we're hitting some sensitive areas. We're pretty confident with what we've gotten and what we've shown, and we're pretty sure we could reproduce that on a 24/7, 365-day grid if we had to. It's just a matter of money. But
and something that came up, and I don't know if, tell me as a engineer if this is true or not. It seems like to me that if you had these one element, if a person is living in Comal County or is going to move to Comal County, and you in the long run have this data, being that 1 in 7 kids, which is twice the national rate, have asthma here, you can look at different areas of the county in which you may not want to live because your child's life might be at risk, especially if they're playing sports outside a lot, or, just to be aware of the basic air quality and health in our county.
Well, what we do know is what the size of the particles or the elements are that affect health. Those have been out. There's probably tens of thousands of studies that have been done by universities and professional groups around the world that have proven this. EPA is aware of it, but like I said, right now they're kind of dysfunctional as well. But monitoring is not that difficult if it's done under the right protocols and for the right reasons. And common sense is just used in how we place them and use the data properly to permit what needs to be permitted. There are states and other countries that require all of this work to be done, and even extensive monitoring on site of mines before they're ever permitted. They're required to do a reclamation plan up front. They have to do EIRs, environmental impact reviews, or site reviews. And I've done and been part of some of those in foreign countries. And I'll tell you what, the ones that I see done by TCEQ in Comal County and other counties that we're looking at, is an absolute joke. They are not a review. It looks to me like more of a tea party or an afternoon walking through the cedars.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but I get a little bit irritated at things that aren't done right.
Well, yeah, and we hope that moving forward, that we'll get a change in leadership come 2020 in November, and we can start to move forward on, not only bringing awareness to people here in Comal County, but to really kind of reshift the focus on protecting the health of its citizens. It doesn't mean you don't have to give up your economy to be pro-ecology or pro-environment. And for so long, I think that's kind of the bill of goods that people have been sold, and it's simply not true. You can do both. You can value business and value the environment at the same time, and even save money in the long run when you think about the impacts of damage that's done, not only from a health aspect, from an environmental aspect. And so I really want to thank you for coming on and talking with me, and I would love it if you would give me some links. You have sent me a lot, but when I upload this video, I'll upload some of your work and some of the studies, and have some links where people can go to get more information. And is there anything that you would like to say in the close?
Well, I'd just like to say, our tech group is founded based on the fact that we're all professional mining people or have experience with mining in various aspects of it. And we've made many offers to sit down with industry and all of the shareholders. The only way this problem is going to get solved is everybody comes to the table and does the right thing. Paying lip service to it and then running around at conventions somewhere out of state and throwing programs out to industry leaders and stuff saying, that these grassroots operations don't know what they're doing, or they're getting hostile and stuff. I haven't seen any hostility. All I've seen is an offer to sit down and resolve these problems in a business-like manner. And that's what needs to happen. And it's not happening here.
Well, I know that you've been going above and beyond to really bring awareness and to do the legwork and do the engineering and the science behind all this, and you and your team. And I want to thank you for that, and thank you for coming on. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you shortly in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You have a good one.
Okay, thank you.